And here to talk about the impact felt right here in the Palmetto State is James Felder, author of the book Civil Rights in South Carolina. Mr. Felder, thank you so much for coming down today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's start by going back.
Okay.
Were you in or around South Carolina around that time?
I was in Washington at that time. I was stationed in the Army at Fort Myer, Virginia. So I attended the March on Washington dressed in full combat gear, helmet, fixed bayonets, live ammunition, gas grenades. They put us on high alert because they didn't know what to expect. They didn't know how many people were coming to town, and so the police department needed reinforcements. So my unit, the Army unit from Fort Myer, we sat on the banks of the Potomac River, right behind the Lincoln Memorial, observing all of the activities and ready to quell any disturbances and so forth. We had a slow day. Nothing happened.
Love it. So the government was actually a little nervous in anticipation.
Very much so. They didn't know what to expect. They didn't know if it was going to be 50,000, 100,000, and when 250,000 showed up, it blew their mind.
Did it blow your mind that 250,000 people can come together, obviously some of them having some emotion behind this, because you don't march on Washington without something prompting you to do so. Was that kind of crazy for you to see that many people and know that everybody was on the same wavelength?
It was, and it took some getting used to. We sat there looking at each other's troops and we eating our sea rations, but we didn't know what to expect. And when nothing happened, we were never called to do anything. Always sat there and watch across the river, watch the crowd come and go. And it just kind of blew your mind. You expected the worst, and nothing happened.
Can I ask you a question? Can I just be real honest about this question?
Sure.
Here you are in your uniform, a black man. Did you want to be over with those people?
Yes, I wanted to be on the other side of the river with the people, with my sign. But I was in the military. Even though I only had a short time left, I still had to do my military obligation. But that's exactly right. And some of the guys, even some of my white friends, said, you shouldn't be here, you should be over there. But I'm in uniform, I'm in the military, so I had to see it where I saw it from.
Were you able to hear any of the speeches?
Yes, we could hear all the speeches. We just couldn't see them because we were at the back of the Lincoln Memorial. They were on the other side. They were on the east side, and we were on the west side of the monument. The sound was good. We could hear everything, and we could see all the people moving. We could see them even dangling their feet in the reflecting pool, trying to cool off. It was a hot day, like it was over 100 that day.
Really, with 250,000 people?
That's correct, and us seeing all of this combat gear, so we were doubly sweating from the heat and all that uniform thing. But nothing happened.
Now, we just had a chance to listen to the I Have a Dream speech, which obviously, stands in the forefront of that day. Were there any other speakers or moments that reached out to you while you're in your uniform that you've remembered for these past 50 years?
John Lewis, who was the student in the group, he was the student speaker that day. They sanitized his remarks because they thought it was too radical. And what they thought was too radical was the last few lines of the speech where he says, well, we're going back to the South now and we're going to march and demonstrate. We're going to march like Sherman marched through Georgia. They said, no, take that out. Don't put that in. Don't reference Sherman marching through Georgia. Too much of throwback to the civil rights, to the Civil War and so forth. But those words, which I knew about beforehand, but it was his speech that really touched me. Now, Dr. King made a great speech, but he had made that speech before. So I had heard that speech before, but America had never heard that speech before, heard about it. And so he was last. All of the civil rights organization came together for that march, but it was King who carried the day.
Now, from what I understand, you came to South Carolina about 5 years after that.
That's correct.
What was the climate like in South Carolina at that time?
That time we only had 8 black elected officials in the entire state, and 4 of them were in Beaufort County. We only had 100,000 black registered voters. Today there are 900,000. So that movement galvanized South Carolina.
Well, and you wrote a book, actually. You talked about that a moment ago. Tell me a little bit about the 20 years of work that you put into this.
I was able to capture most of what is happening in South Carolina from a civil rights standpoint, from a human rights standpoint, from 1939 through 2010.
Your next book, let's say it takes you another 20 years. What would you like that book to say about the civil rights movement in South Carolina from 2010 to 2030?
I'd like to say we've laid racial attitudes aside, and now blacks can vote for whites, and whites can vote for blacks. That is the next step, and I think that will happen because of my grandchildren, their generation. They don't know those prejudices, and they haven't been taught those prejudices. So I think in 20 years we will have solved all the racial problems in South Carolina because of that generation.
I look forward to reading your book from cover to cover.
Okay.
Thank you for writing and coming to see us today.
You're welcome.